It's a Conspiracy is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network. For other fun programming, please check out albertapodcastnetwork.com, where you can find shows like the Fourth Line Hockey Podcast.
Oklahoma, Oklahoma, take me on down to Arizona.
Okay, go.
Okay.
You can go. I just had to open the beer and I didn't want to crack it while you were saying things.
All right.
All right. All right, go.
Welcome back, everyone, to It's a Conspiracy. This is the podcast where we lay out the beliefs behind selected conspiracy theories, alternative accounts, legends, myths, and more. I'm your host, Andrew, and I do not claim to be an expert on anything we're going to discuss today, and will probably be wrong about everything as usual, because I am sunburnt from head to toe after a weekend away. So if you guys want a little hint for making things as romantic as possible, plan a weekend away with your partner, book a hotel, get the kids taken care of, all that kind of stuff. And then on the first day of your romantic getaway, just get third-degree burns from soup to nuts, from your head to your toes, and just spend the rest of the weekend complaining about how painful that is.
Andrew, I warned you to going on your romantic getaway. Leave the tinfoil hat at home, man. That's just going to attract the sun.
It was my tinfoil shorts and but no, it was fun. And I was down in Lethbridge and Waterton, and it was hot. It was so hot. Like,
how hot was it?
It was like plus 30, 32 maybe. Brutal, like horrible. The sun was just pounding on me, and I'm like, we're Canadian. This is ridiculous. I hate it. So, anyways, this is our Lethbridge Special 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. Never gets old.
If you'd like to see where we dug up whatever choice cuts we're going to discuss today, then please stop by the resources in the episode description. Charlie peels off those husks of tasty cob Tabor corn gold, and he would love you to appreciate his noble efforts, or whatever it is.
Slather them up in butter.
Lastly, we are a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network. Yay.
Yay, team!
Okay, so you can check us out online at our website, itsconspiracypodcast.com, our Twitter, @isitaconspiracy, that's run by the Irish Madman, our Facebook group, our Instagram page, It's Conspiracy Podcast, that's run by Greg. My phone went off, as usual.
Classic
Unreal.
Andy.
Our email and our Patreon page, patreon.com/ It's a conspiracy. Well, that's getting worse every time. Like, that is
just
really...
keep slowing it down. Stop slowing it down.
I just want to say it together. It sounds... Anyways. Okay, now joining the online distance communication time today is Charming Charlie.
Hey.
And we have our friends Ryan Heseltine and
Hello.
John Martin. Yeah, thanks.
Hello.
And it's John without an H.
That's right. It's like the non-asshole way. the regular way.
These friends will interject as they see fit, and I really appreciate the digital distance company. I'm glad we can do this. Just hashtag best friends forever.
Did you invent it?
Now, Charlie, with a yes or no, can you tell me if you've heard of any of these theories?
Lay it on me.
So, number 1, 10 fun facts about Lethbridge.
No, and did you number them this time?
No, I didn't. Whoops. Damn it. So there's some fun. Anyways.
Some fun facts about Lethbridge. Gotcha.
Number 2, where did the Olde Style Pilsner label come from? Hint,
No.
Lethbridge.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. Okay. Now, number 3, Ryan, what is the theory that you're going to share with us this evening?
Oh, I've got a good old urban legend concerning Lethbridge's very own Satanic Panic of 1989, 1990.
Nice.
Oh, my.
I have not heard of that.
It's heavy.
Heard of that.
Heavy stuff.
And then, John, what are you going to share with us tonight?
I'm going to talk a little bit about the legend of the tunnels from Lethbridge to Moose Jaw.
The tunnels.
Maybe I'll leave it at that. The tunnels. The tunnels of Lethbridge.
Yeah, I get to talk about tunnels in mine, too. Lethbridge is all about tunnels.
What if they're the same tunnels and they reach in the middle and touch each other?
Oh, hashtag best friends, right? Like, that's just hashtag. So here we go. Subject number 1, 10 fun facts about Lethbridge. Maybe there's not 10, but there's fun.
Lethbridge.
Okay, number 1, Lethbridge became a city on May 9th, 1906. Good Good times. Number 2, there's a big bridge running through the city, but that's not where the name comes from. The bridge is almost 100 meters high, and it's really pretty, but the name comes from like William Lethbridge, who ran a company or something. So
Of the Lethbridges.
Of the Lethbridge family. Yeah. So the people are like, oh, the Lethbridge, I get it. And it's like, no, that's not it. Just a coincidence. Number 3, agriculture is the main industry in southern Alberta and plays a big role in the city's retail, wholesale, and service sectors. Yeehaw! Lots of cowboys. That's fun. Yeah. Lots of corn folk in Lethbridge, actually. Whole lot of corn people. I wrote down...
What's a corn people?
A corn people, I don't know, cornies.
So lots of children of the corn.
Oh, man.
They tell lame jokes.
I meant to write down Lethbridge, but I wrote down Lethbridge has more than 130 parks, a huge number of playgrounds and sports fields through the city. And this is shocking. The city has more than 240 kilometers of walking and running trails.
That's a lot of clicks.
240 kilometers, though. That's a lot.
Unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. That sounded like there was a tone there, but that really does sound...
Well, one of the trails is called the 6 Mile Coulee. It's a long hiking trail on the south side of town.
Yeah.
So with coulees all around the city, I could see it.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the coulee in a second, but we'll... the coulee, if you're not familiar with what that is, well, we'll get to it. Here's a fun fact, just loads with laughter here. Lethbridge was host to an internment camp during the First World War. So between 1914 and 1920, the Canadian government interned over 8,000 so-called enemy aliens in 24 camps across Canada. One of them was in Lethbridge, right on what are now the fairgrounds. And a number of these internees had lived in southern Alberta prior to their internment. These are people who had lived in Canada for generations and were like, you got an accent, you got the wrong face. You're going into the internment camp. Here we go. And then there was the
unfair grounds.
The unfair grounds. That's right. They were treated unfairly. Yeah. That should be the unfair grounds. So there was a huge escape. Okay. The Great Escape was April 26, 1916. 6 internees escaped the camp through a 111-foot-long tunnel. There's another tunnel that ran from the poultry building to an area behind bushes and trees outside the city nurseries. The 6 internees were never caught. More internees may have escaped, and it's really awkward saying internees over and over. So, yeah, that was a big deal. A bunch of the Great Escape of Lethbridge. Now, the internment camp was shut down in sometime later on. I'm not exactly sure, but it went all the way to there was this article in the States in the Chicago Tribune, November 28, 1915, stating that the prisoners from the Lethbridge detention camp were grossly abused by guards and officers. The charges were sent to the United States Consulate in Calgary, but nothing ever came from the charges. The camp's commanding officer at the time, James Burney, called the charges ridiculous. So, yeah, sounds like a bit of a snafu. Had you guys heard of the internment camp before?
Oh, yeah.
Lots. And the Great Escape?
Yeah. I have heard of that.
Yeah.
I'm old Lethbridge.
Yeah. Had you heard of that one before, John?
Internment camps, yeah, but not the escape. The internment camps, like there used to be all kinds of stories, and this is ridiculous, about forts and the coulees that were built to house people that were escaping from the internment camps and stuff. Of course, nobody could find or say where they were or are or anything like that. So it was like, a load of crap. But
there was also a POW camp in Lethbridge. It was a German POW camp where they sent Kriegsmarine people. So all the submariners and the German U-boats, if they were captured, they were sent directly to Lethbridge. And my grandfather-in-law actually used to employ them on the farm. So he had all these stories of all these Germans that would come work on his farm during the day and then go back to their cells at night.
Did they stick around after the war?
A lot of them did, yeah. A lot of them got married in town and stuck around.
That is wild. You can imagine that being like, oh, you're the bad guy. Hey, the war's over. It's all right. Just stick around. I'll grow some corn. Have you guys heard about... So here's number 6. It's a bit shocking. it's the time the mayor got electrocuted in front of everybody. The Valentine's Ball in 1953, Mayor Shackelford was acting as MC for the dance at the Civic Center. That's a very fancy name for what is a pretty dumpy building. And he's introducing a bunch of ladies. And when he was saying their names, he grabbed both microphone stands at the same time, and he's like, and they're like, Izzy, what's going on here? And someone was like, he's being electrocuted, quick. And he couldn't. He's like, my body's seized up. I couldn't let go. And someone took an amazing picture of this, and it ended up being. It was sent all over the world. Everyone saw this, and it ended up being the picture of the week in Life magazine, and was featured in newspapers in Israel, Japan, across North and South America, and throughout Europe. It was even featured on the front page of the London Daily Mirror, a newspaper with 5 million people watching it. So the photographer won Best Picture of the Year from the Canadian Press Service, and the next year, I guess that would be 1954. They had the Valentine's Day dance again. Same guy goes up to announce the names, and the people were like, here's some rubber gloves. Don't touch on the mic stands. He's like, ah, ha, ha. Yeah. Now, I do need to show you guys this picture because it really just does need to be seen. Charlie, can I share? Can I?
Got it. Go.
Can you guys see this picture here?
Yeah, it looks like he's rocking out to some.
He does.
I feel good.
He looks like Michael J. Fox in the Back to the Future, just like
in the background.
Yeah.
I was thinking like a Weekend at Bernie's. They're just dropping him off.
I just love that he's like just in front of everyone, and they're like, "What's wrong with him?" And he's just So yeah, that's pretty great.
That's a pretty current story,
Yeah.
Andrew.
That was a current event. That's right. Okay. So number 7, maybe. Oh, is this number 7, Charlie? Are you keeping track?
Give or take.
Lethbridge has Chinooks. So what is a Chinook? A Chinook is a warm west wind that predominates the weather patterns of southwest blah blah blah. It's a bunch of it's hot air during the winter, basically.
That sounds like
and the word it's a lot of hot air. That's right. The word Chinook is a Blackfoot word that means snow eater. So it comes in and it increases temperatures by several degrees, like within minutes. And people are like, oh, that sounds really nice in the middle of winter. A Chinook blows in. It's like, oh, nice. It's like the opposite of a breeze on a hot day. But as you guys would know, a Chinook comes in and it just plays hell with your brains and your skull because you're like, I'm getting a horrible headache. There must be, it's a Chinook. So, yeah. And we'll say this is number 10. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Sure.
Here's 10. Lethbridge has a coulee. So what is a coulee?
That's the opposite of a Chinook.
It's not that kind of coulee. A coulee is a steep-sided V-shaped valley or ravine. It's not the same as a canyon. And the name coulee was first used by early French-Canadian voyageurs crossing the Great Plains. The word coulee comes from the French word couler, meaning to flow. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that correct. The coulees are distinct in formations. Some of them have been created by glacial erosion after the last ice age, and others from continued water and wind erosion. So it says they're not canyons and they weren't carved out by water, but then it says they were carved by water and wind and glaciers.
Well, the initial formations were carved underneath the glaciers. So they were like the veins under the glaciers that ran, and it carved out. And then over the once the glaciers receded, the wind came, which is why all the coulees run the direction of the wind. You can see it crisscrossing the veins of the glacial veins, and then you have the crisscrossing windways. I don't know.
Yeah, they are real neat.
Oh, I was just going to say it actually wasn't. Well, I mean, I was going to say it wasn't that long ago, but it was extremely long ago. Before Alberta was I guess with the creation of the Rocky Mountains and everything, it's like the whole of Alberta, and especially down the Rockies, was a big sea. Like it was a big giant ocean. And so I would imagine that some of the formation of the glaciers and everything like that from the sea vacating would leave the initial pathways for the water to start. eroding, and wind and glaciers, and then that would just kind of expand over as they dried up and as normal water would run.
That's why you find a lot of nesting sites in the coulees, dinosaur nesting sites, because it would have been along the beach of the inland sea.
Mm-hmm. Sweet.
And then so you get these nesting sites, and then for a few layers, it's all marine life, and then land life and marine life. It goes back and forth quite a bit around here.
That does beg the question: is there a Lethbridgeosaurus?
Nope. There's a ceratopsian named after Wendy Sloboda, who was from, I can't remember whether she's from Lethbridge, but she found the dinosaur embryos back in the late 80s and got famous for it.
For dinosaur embryos.
Yep. Really
cool.
Intact embryos. They were found out by Milk River.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Drumheller, I don't know. It's got the. I don't think Lethbridge has like a dinosaur museum per se, but Drumheller probably has one of the best in the world, and it's really not that far.
Yep.
No, it's amazing. It's my favorite place in the world.
Go there every couple of years.
Yeah.
I like dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs are great. Dinosaurs are neat. Let's just talk about dinosaurs.
They really are neat.
Thanks for stopping by the dinosaur special.
Yeah.
If you want a fun fact, actually, about the Royal Tyrrell, I actually have a permanent sound installation in the Royal Tyrrell Museum for the Trilobites exhibition. So the one with the glass floor.
Cool.
About, I don't know what it would have been, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I designed a big, like, 12-channel piece. It's about a half an hour long, and it kind of had to be within certain constraints to kind of jive with how the exhibit gets used. And there's some narration that automatically triggers when you walk into it or whatever. And I think it's still there. It was supposed to be in there for 10 or 15 years, and I can't imagine they would have had a budget to replace that in the last few years. So assuming that it's still there, the room with the glass floor, you'll hear some stuff and you'll be like, what the hell is this? And that's my what the hell is this? It's an electroacoustic piece.
Nice.
That's
like,
awesome.
It's like an ambient music thing in the background sort of thing? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but it's like a featured, it's kind of like it's like a quasi Brian, it's kind of like a Brian Eno-esque piece. Mm-hmm. But it's a little bit more maybe up front than, it's not like a fully ambient piece. And so if you go and stand in there, there'll be some narration that we recorded with a voice actor. And then other than that, you get this 4-movement piece I did called Music for Stationary Trilobites, which I thought was just hilarious at the time. And as you look at the giant, like, foamy hot dog creatures and all that stuff. But
oh, dude, I know what part you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Burgess Shale.
Yeah, the Burgess Shale.
Which, by the way, if you want to hike the Burgess Shale, it is ridiculously expensive. It's like over $100 just to go on this hike on this mountainside where there are no trees and no shade. And
why?
I to protect the fossils, I think.
It's a money grab, man. I mean, big
oh
time.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. I know this is about Drumheller, and we're supposed to be talking about Lethbridge, but a buddy of mine went to his parents. He married this girl from Newfoundland. He got married, and her parents came out to see them for the wedding. They went to Drumheller, and they're like, "Oh, we want to see the museum," and they're like, "Oh, the museum's shut down today because Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were like wandering the museum, and they had to have the whole place to themselves."
Of course.
And he was in. Actually, I think he was in Lethbridge shooting that Jesse James movie. And they had to have the whole museum shut down so they could look around at the pretty dinosaurs.
I've heard that.
All right, well, there we go.
All 10 fun facts?
Some fun facts, yeah. Okay. Subject number 2, Pilsner. Where's the Pilsner label from? It's actually from Lethbridge.
Yum.
Lethbridge.
Okay, so this is a bit of a local reference. When I moved back to Edmonton in 2010, I popped by a bar and ordered a Pilsner. And the bartender immediately asked me, "Oh, are you from Saskatchewan?" And I'm like, No, of course I'm not. And he's like, "Only people from Saskatchewan drink that. You must be from, so are you sure you're not from Saskatchewan?" And I'm like, "No, man, I went to university in Lethbridge, and that's where the beer comes from, and it's really good, and it's not from Saskatchewan." He's like, "No, it's from Saskatchewan." So since then, almost without fail, anytime I've ordered a pill in Edmonton, somebody would be like, "Oh, Saskatchewan." I'm like, it's not from Saskatchewan. Like, I don't want to fight you, but I will.
Yeah,
and the worst part is when someone
You've really been using this podcast to air your grievances lately.
This is a vendetta. This is a personal vendetta.
It's not festival.
Yeah, it's the really frustrating part is like it's one thing when the bartender's like, yeah, you're Saskatchewan, but when someone from Saskatchewan is like, I'll have a Pilsner because I'm from Saskatchewan and that's where they're from, and I'm like, damn it, like it's not from Saskatchewan. You're not allowed to say that. So here's a couple of facts courtesy of the concrete academic pillar Wikipedia. Okay, so number one, Pilsner was first brewed in 1926 by, this is an amazing name, Fritz Sick at Six Breweries in Lethbridge. Number two, the beer still sticks to the same Sick recipe, which sounds gross, but it was the recipe that Sick came up with. Number three, the label of the beer is an homage to Lethbridge, and it's immediately disqualifying Saskatchewan because there's like a mountain and like winding roads, so that clearly is not Saskatchewan. Like Saskatchewan is just flat and empty. Number four, the beer is attached to the Saskatchewan Roughriders football team, but that was decades later. I do love the Rough Riders, and I wish them all the best when the CFL picks up after the apocalypse. Number five, the worst part about all of this is that the website for Pilsner has labeled themselves. They're like Pilsner, a.k.a. Saskatchewan Champagne. That just makes me want to puke. So it's from Lethbridge, and it's good beer.
Have you ever heard the song by do you ever hear the Agriculture Club? You remember that band?
I do, yes.
Yeah, they had the Ballad of Pilsner beer. You remember that?
I don't, but yeah. Stick that in.
Prayers and he always will. That's why God gave the prayers Lethbridge Pill.
The Well Endowed podcast by the Edmonton Community Foundation, hosted by Andrew Paul and Elizabeth Bonking, produced by Lisa Pruden. This podcast explores the impact of passionate people who are working to make Edmonton a strong, vibrant city to live in. Subscribe at the wellendowedpodcast.com. That's thewellendowedpodcast.com.
All right, and we're back with Ryan Heseltine. So what are you gonna tell us here? There you go.
You know, it was hard to pick. I've lived in Lethbridge long enough to hear a few of the interesting nuggets from our history. I was going to talk about, we have this art center called the Yates Memorial Center, which years ago I remember studying it in my archaeology class, actually. We did a little digging. Turns out it's named after Guinevere Yates, who ran one of the larger brothels in the city of Lethbridge. Around the turn of the century, there were a good 20 or so brothels in this little town. What brought them was the coal mines. And so that got me thinking, well, there's all these mines apparently under the west side of Lethbridge, and they run pretty deep. And so I thought I'd look into that. And then I remembered I grew up in the north side of Lethbridge, and just by where I lived in this little section called Hardyville are these old abandoned coal mines. And that got me thinking of when I was a kid, everybody freaking out about Satanism in Lethbridge.
What?
Because
okay.
And it's so I thought I would talk about Lethbridge's Satanic Panic, which was an international thing. There was an article in Macleans about it and everything. So this was, of course, in the late 80s during the height of the Satanic Panic, which it was something that kind of started with the rise of evangelism in the States in the early 1980s. It was a way to scapegoat the rise and reporting of some pretty strong sexual and emotional abuse claims. So they were saying, oh, it's Satan, or people would try to get out of their, they would use it as a defense, like I was possessed by the devil and all that. It's probably no coincidence that The Exorcist had kind of become a big part of culture by that point too. So there was a lot of fear among parents, and it led to a lot of accusations against Dungeons and Dragons, heavy metal music. And then it was perpetuated through the 80s by religious conferences, bad science, especially bad social working, which I might talk about in a bit. And talk shows perpetuated the myth of Satanism all the way through the 80s. And it just got bigger and crazier and crazier. But in Lethbridge, it happened, it came to this town in 1989. So it centered around the suicides of three 14-year-olds in the city. these kids were like, from what I've read and heard, they were kind of outcasts in society. They didn't live with their parents. In fact, they probably didn't live with any adults that were responsible. But there was a lot of weird influences from them. And then the first one killed himself at a friend's house. Imagine that. The second one was found hanged a few months later, and he had hung himself in a home that all these kids had owned. There were all these kids living in this house. So once the second one happened, there were reports of a suicide pact between the two. And then when the third suicide happened a few days later, that got worse. And there was evidence that there was a suicide pact between at least two of those three kids. But the city went absolutely bonkers. And parents were running around freaking out all over the place. One kid brought forward a list to the RCMP saying that, well, here's a list of kids that are all part of this suicide pact. So there was at least 10 kids, probably more than that, named. So each of these kids was rounded up, and some of them were hospitalized or thrown into, were moved to a different house, and all this stuff was totally baseless accusations. But these kids had their lives turned upside down. And it was later shown that this list, the long list, was most likely fake. It just was part of that gross overreaction. So that kind of blew up, and it led to all of these rumors circulating that the reason that they had made the suicide pact was that they were in a satanic cult. And it was believed that this satanic cult was meeting in these old mine shafts near Hardyville, where I lived. And that they would meet at midnight and dance and do all that stuff, which is odd because I remember growing up there very specifically in that time. We used to play in those mines a lot. They were old, rundown, big concrete pillars and stuff. I used to think it was an old castle when I was a kid. And there was a lot of graffiti. None of it was satanic. Most of it was just anatomy.
Anatomy, like, can you give us an example of like shoulders, knees, and toes?
Yeah, just shoulders, knees, and toes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, of course, as soon as the Satanism started to become a thing, it started to get national and international acclaim. And there were all these questions asked about, were they involved with these satanic rituals and everything? I mean, to this day, there has never been a shred of evidence put forward that there was any truth in that. These kids just listened to heavy metal music, and I don't even think they played D&D, but I do remember when I was in high school going to my mom and being like, hey, Mom, I'm going to play Dungeons and Dragons at my friend's house. And she was like, oh, you can't do that. It's going to lead to Satanism. And it was really bizarre.
Did it?
Did it?
But that's your next sentence is like, and that's how I became a Satanist.
Right. Yeah. But it's just so sad. Not only were three kids, they died because they had no system to look out for them. There was nobody there to help when they needed it. And instead of trying to look at maybe the root cause of this, I mean, all these kids running around free without any supervision, they just decided to blame the devil and, instead of dealing with anything real, which was probably the reason Satanism, the rumor of Satanism spread, because not only was there no evidence of anything in Lethbridge, but to this date, there's not a single shred of evidence that there has ever in any country been an actual satanic ritual performed. It's all just done to, get people afraid. It just seems easier to do that.
Do you mean like with like people killing themselves kind of thing, or like trying to cast spells or something like that?
No, the thought of like people meeting in a house and like painting pentagrams on the floor and sacrificing a goat and doing all that.
That house on 6th Avenue, it's a duplex now. It's maybe between like 7th and 8th. It's on the south side of 6th Avenue. And they burned it down and rebuilt it as a duplex because it was a Satan house. Yeah. Do you know anything about that? Did you find anything
people
about that?
Would often talk about whether it was related to the satanic worship that was going on all over Lethbridge.
I remember people would say, don't walk by that house at night because that's a devil house and all this stuff. And one time I was walking to the Slice, which is downtown in Lethbridge, and from my house I had to walk by the Satan house. And I was right in front of the Satan house, and is this a swear-friendly podcast?
Oh, go ahead, man. Yeah, whatever.
Some fucking guy threw a can at me, like a can of Pepsi or something like that. And then I saw his car so it missed me right in front of the Satan house, and I was like, asshole or whatever. It was probably more colorful than asshole. And then I kept going, and then the truck was at the Slice when I got there, and so I had this like moral dilemma of whether or not I should do anything to said truck, and if this has nothing to do with Satanism. Besides, I remember being in front of the Devil House, but yeah, I should have carved a pentagram in his door.
Oof.
Right. Regrets for life, I guess.
So this got me digging a little bit on it, and if you're curious, the whole idea around Satanism also comes out of a book by Lawrence Pastor, who was like a sociologist who was working and wrote this book from one of her patients who she called Smith, who couldn't remember chunks of his youth, and so she used hypnotism and all these really sketchy pseudoscientific, healing crystal-y sort of things to get him to remember his youth. And the memory that came out was all about satanic rituals in his basement with his mother and father and all the neighborhood, and sexual abuse and all that stuff. So she got all sorts of acclaim. She was brought in on trials, abuse trials all across the United States, and all of her work has subsequently been discredited. But I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a memory recall thing that she had developed. And what it actually is implanting memories in a victim or in somebody. You can convince somebody that something happened in their past actually pretty easily. And so, yeah, it caused a hell of a stir back then. And then just the last thing I thought I would talk about before I pass it along is actual Satanism today. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. I was kind of surprised. But there is a satanic temple that's really active.
You mentioned it earlier. I was going to say that they put up stuff on like Twitter and Facebook all the time. It's hilarious.
Yeah. And they're an atheistic organization. And they fight the separation of church and state. So in Arkansas or in, I don't know, Alabama or something, if they want to put some religious statue in a courthouse, the Satanic Temple will go in and say, sure, you can put that there, but I'm going to put a statue to Satan right beside it. And they use the same law and they get it passed. And there's actually 2 statues of a goat-headed demon figure in the United States right now that they've been able to get in by that, which I found kind of funny. So
I wonder if any of those have been pulled down in the last few weeks.
Probably. Oh, here we go. I found out where it is. It's in Oklahoma and Arkansas. They've got those 2 statues put up. So instead of it being anything about actual biblical Satanism, it's just kind of a way to fight that separation of church and state stuff.
Man. Which is kind of funny when you think about it, because like Europe is literally riddled with scary demon statues everywhere, like all over churches and schools and old buildings. There's like big scary demons just popping out like blah, and they're like, oh, that was to scare away the ghosts. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure somebody was like, this stuff looks really cool and we just like putting it on buildings. Like, yeah, maybe it scares away the spirits, but it also looks really cool. So
15th century metal.
Yeah. Yeah. Just geeks. Oh. Yeah. You mentioned, was this the lady that came up with the where did he touch you bear?
Yeah, that was it. And that was part of it, because these kids that were like 3 years old would just play with the bear, and she would interpret them playing with it as, this is where this person touched me. So they don't use that anymore when they investigate, because it led to so many false accusations. Which
is this tied to the separation of church and state, or
no? But the recovered look at that. My notes are good. The recovered memory theory that author had put through, the Satanic Temple fights anytime it's attempted to be used in the court of law. They put one of their lawyers in, and they fight it, so it can't be used. And they've successfully sued dozens of cases on that.
So Satanism is about equality.
Oh yeah, they have tenets, man, and they're like the secular 10 Commandments, except
Totally.
there's 7 of them, just to make it satanic.
Yeah, we should clarify that we're not promoting Satanism or any other whatever. Just
No,
talking about it.
it's just so interesting.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I had this memory from my youth, and then you go and pull one little string, and before you know it, the whole bookshelf's falling down on you. It was really interesting to research this, and crazy.
Somebody did a video. I remember seeing it back in the day of like the early days of YouTube. Somebody was like, "Oh, I shot a music video," and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be so painful to watch. Like they're going to be standing on railroad tracks or whatever." I'm just like, "Oh, I'd love to see it." Ugh. And when they showed me it, they were at the ruins by Hardyville with the graffiti all over the. And I was like, "This is amazing! Like, where is this?" And they were like, "Oh, it's out by Hardyville. It's great. It's just out by yeah." But it was a good video for that.
And I think they're gone now. I haven't been out Hardyville way in a bit, but the city is all swept across all of that. So it wouldn't surprise me if they dug them up.
All right, okay. Well, that's going to take us to ad number 2.
Number 2.
This episode is brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your energy from. If you switch retailers, nothing changes about the delivery of electricity or natural gas to your home or business. The choice is yours, and there's a better deal available to you. Learn more at parkpower.ca. That's parkpower.ca.
And we're back. This is going to take us to subject number 4 with John without an H. Martin. So, John, go ahead and tell us all about it.
All right. Well, if you grew up in Lethbridge, by the time you hit your teenage years, it was almost not necessarily a rite of passage, but maybe it was. That was a pun that I wasn't going to play out there. That at a certain point, you would go to first you'd hear stories of, somebody had a weird door in their basement, or there would be a local business downtown that would have some kind of a path to some cool room, and maybe you'd hear about kids going down there to like have parties, or like some drug room, or maybe they had, like satanic rituals where they cut up goats and, made pacts with the devil and all that stuff. And wherever it happened to be, you would hear this when you're a teenager. And the kind of rumor was that all over Lethbridge, that all the buildings and everything downtown were connected by this big series of tunnels that ultimately all kind of ended and connected to what's now the Galt Museum, which is kind of on it's on the edge of the coulee, and now it used to be the Galt Hospital. And so eventually, sometime in your teenage years, or maybe in your early 20s or something, you would end up at a party or a location or something where you would actually go and visit these tunnels. Rumor has it that this giant network of mysterious tunnels that was under Lethbridge, and nobody knew why it was there or anything, stretched all the way to Moose Jaw, and was used because in Moose Jaw there are tunnels as well that Al Capone used to smuggle booze and everything during Prohibition and whatever else from Chicago or something like that. And that the tunnels in Lethbridge went all the way to Moose Jaw. I don't know, I guess years later, I bought the house that I live in now. And before I had my studio downtown, I had a drum set in the basement, and I was playing drums one day, moving the kit around, trying to find where it sounds best or whatever. And I was like, this is really, really strange. Because it sounds really resonant right in this spot. Like there's some weird kind of thing. So I started tapping on the floor because I could hear that it was a little bit higher pitched and kind of like thunky. And I traced out by tapping kind of how big this pit was. And it's a little bit wider and shorter than a coffin. And I have a weird old house. It's one of the oldest houses in Lethbridge. And so we started poking around the archives and the Lethbridge Historical Society and everything, and we found that, sure enough, this house, being one of the earliest houses in Lethbridge, has a tunnel, has an entrance to the tunnels underneath Lethbridge. So they do actually exist, and there are over 3,200 kilometers of tunnels. Think about that, 3,200 kilometers of tunnels. It's insane. Okay, so I just sent you that to the group. I just sent that image. So, sure enough, that there are 3,200 kilometers of tunnels that were built over the course of 90 years in Lethbridge. And so these go all the way to McGrath. They connect Lethbridge with McGrath and Picture Butte and Colehurst and underneath Diamond City. And so I guess you'd have to look on a map just to see how big of an area that is. But it's not a small area. Like, you're talking about tens of kilometers, I guess, in any direction for a total of 3,200 kilometers of tunnels. And
oh, sorry, man.
it?
Yeah, I'm just going to pull up this picture. Just pull this up here real quick. Well, that's not it. Wait a minute. Sorry.
So is there any official explanations to what they were for?
Yeah, so the official explanation of these tunnels is that Lethbridge was like Pandora's box filled with Satanists, and so they actually built them all to put the Satanists inside, and then they cemented all of them over, and then
as you do,
and then a subsect of the Lethbridge Satanist Society actually put a different hex on all of the doorways to make sure that anybody broke them open would be cast down to the 6th or 7th level of hell. So that's the official explanation. But there are also rumors that they were used for a thing called drift mining. And so drift mining is where you go however far below the ground level, and there are these big strips of coal, and they're not necessarily linear. They just kind of like run in a path. And so with drift mining, they would dig down, they'd find one of these, like, till they found coal, and they would find one of these big kind of like streets, like big tubes almost of coal, and then they would just follow that and keep mining it until it was done. As far as anyone can tell, that these are all, at least anyway, for drift mining. And then of course later on during Prohibition, people were adding, who had access to the tunnel network, were adding to them. They were using them to smuggle things, hide people, as we talked about before. They were used as internment escape tunnels. And so there's actually an enormous tunnel network underneath Lethbridge. And it's like I have an entrance in my house, which is kind of crazy.
And so you've gone down there, yeah?
Well, you see, the logic is that if I open the proverbial, well, it's not proverbial, if I open the sealed bit to this hole, anything, if I can go in, any kind of creature, spawn of Satan, whatever, can come out of said hole into my home. So I'm keeping that, I have Ryan actually helped me draw a really large pentagram just on, and so it's protecting me from.
You got to let that thing out, man. You got to let it out, and then whatever riches are underneath, they're all yours.
I've thought about it. Make it an echo chamber or something.
Isn't that the plot to the movie Critters?
Critters in there.
We have a friend who I don't want to say who it was because I feel like I'm remembering this wrong, but they had one of these doors in their place. And like the city came in and like cemented over it so that they couldn't use it. Like a really long time ago. Yeah.
That I think that happened here in the 70s, where ours was sealed. And I guess like you wouldn't know from actually just like looking. Like we have a half dirt, half concrete, like an old turn of the century basement. Like it's not a modern basement or anything like that. But if you were to just look at where the concrete's poured, there's no way that you would actually know that there's anything there. And the only reason I found it is because the drums that I had there sounded completely different. Like something was wrong. And I was like, what's going on? And then found it. So, but if you do want to see one, and I mean, I don't know, I used to think that everybody had been to inside of a Lethbridge tunnel, but that's not actually the case because so many of them are closed off. So at Catholic Central High School, there used to be an entrance to the tunnels there, a big one. And that maybe about, I think it was like 20 or 25 years ago, they boarded and concreted that all up because people were going down there. And it was still closed further into the tunnel, but they closed off the actual entrance in the school. At what's now Studio 54, or what is perhaps more lovingly known as the Goose, in downtown Lethbridge, they have an entrance to the tunnels there. And parties used to happen there all the time. Maybe they still do. I have no idea. I mean, when was the last time anybody's gone to the Goose? At least 6 months, I guess. And it's like a dirty room with chairs and cigarette butts, and
that's crazy, man.
I did a Halloween tour of the Goat Museum a couple of years ago, and they bring you down and you can see a chunk of it. it's cut off pretty quick. But there's another tunnel story that isn't a story. It was true, I guess. But I wonder if they used the same tunnel network or if they built another one. And that is when they built St. Michael's Hospital, they had the connection, an underground tunnel between the Galt Museum and St. Mike's. And then when they built the Lethbridge Regional Hospital, there's a tunnel that goes between those two hospitals. And it was a way to move equipment without having to go through traffic or something. But I wonder if they just they co-opted the old tunnel network or built their own. There's a Lethbridge and tunnels.
Well, I think, especially given that the Galt Museum was initially the Galt Hospital, like that's why they had those tunnels initially, like at the Galt, like the ones that you can see at least the beginning of on the like Lethbridge Tunnel tour or whatever. Those were all for equipment transfer. And I mean, it's not a terrible idea. Like if you need to, I don't know, move a bunch of ventilators or something like that between, you're not going to roll them down the street, you know, or like maybe it's too, like you're not going to lift them into a vehicle or whatever necessarily to go, like what's the distance between St. Mike's and Lethbridge Regional Hospital, like 2 blocks or something. So it's like, that's not even that unreasonable to do. And so I imagine that they would have been co-opted and put into use if they were there. And then you kind of add in the network of other tunnels that were used to connect buildings and do illegal, like black market trading and partying and who knows.
And the Lethbridge Red Light District is where the Lethbridge Lodge is today, right off Scenic Drive, which isn't far from the Galt Hospital.
No, it's up the street, man.
And not very far from Lethbridge's churches. You know, we got those underground tunnels, a way to get people in and out of the Red Light District without being seen.
Well, maybe just to close off, because so the difficult part with the tunnels is that people either have like firsthand experience with them, or there's very little information at the Galt or like with the Lethbridge Historical Society. So a lot of it's like really you don't know, and it's like a fun fact. It's like over 70% of stories and information about tunnels like is just completely made up anyway. So
mine sure was.
Opinion time, opinion time. Hey everybody, it's opinion time.
All right, well, so Charlie, does Pilsner come from Lethbridge?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Absolutely.
Yes, it does.
And as I was saying about the ballad,
I'm pretty sure it comes from Saskatchewan.
It's well touted in the song "The Ballad of Pilsner Beer" that God gave the prairies Lethbridge pill. Our lakes are filled with pill, and it's flowing through our veins, and we drink pill from the sky when it rains. Okay. That's where it comes from.
Okay, and that was from the Agriculture Club.
That's the Agriculture Club. That was
okay. Thank you, Agriculture Club, for being on the right side of history, and everyone else, curse you. Charlie, what do you think about the Satanic Panic of Lethbridge in 1989? Which was when the Batman movie came out.
My overarching opinion about this is that for the Lethbridge Special 3, whatever, 3D, whatever we're calling it.
With a vengeance?
We got to go Geraldo Rivera style, and we got to get in these tunnels, man. Mm-hmm. We got to see what's in there. We know where an entrance is. We just got to get through it, right?
I bet so. Somebody who was supposed to be on the show might even I don't know. I'm not going to say his name because he's camping. He might have a tunnel entrance.
Camper X knows where we can get into a tunnel.
Well, like it's very close to one of those other locations I mentioned that does have an entrance, and so. Mm-hmm. I mean, all like anywhere around there. Like the reason is actually kind of funny. So if a house hasn't been renovated or like hasn't been pulled down in the like downtown London Road area in Lethbridge. So like my house, I have a garage and then I have this weird little shack in the back of my lot. It's like, why is this here? And apparently those are like minor shafts, or they were barracks for traveling RCMP officers that were coming through. So if it was a minor shack, they would, while they were building their house, while they're working in the mines and saving up money and building it slowly, they would live in these little shacks. And then, they would build their house where there's an entrance to the tunnels for some godforsaken reason. Or they would have these small little shacks there so officers could stay at, stay like in that shack, assuming that the house would have been owned by another, RCMP or something like that. And so if you go around downtown, you look for people that have these little shacks in their backyard. It's like they will likely have an entrance to the tunnels. especially if it's in the London Road or Victoria Park area.
Just got to go.
There's an old
door to door and
RCMP
ask them for a
fort
check.
there too. Like Fort Whoop Up.
Fort Whoop Up is in the Coolies, but where Fort Whoop Up is now is just a reconstruction. So that's not actually Fort Whoop Up or the Fort Whoop Up site. Real Fort Whoop Up was further down the Coolies, and I think it got burned down or, something like that. In a satanic ritual, likely.
That's not a real name, guys.
That's a real name, and I know that sounds like a
Fort
real
Whoop Up.
Whoop Up. Yeah, it sounds like
That's really
like
it's really fun when you have a friend visiting for the first time from out east or something, giving them directions to my house, and like, well, you just take Whoop Up West, and they're like, say again. Street is called Whoop Up.
Turn
Whoop
off the
Up in
memograph.
Stratford. Yeah.
I'm telling you, we got to get in these tunnels.
Well, it's possible. So I that was a big detour, but what I'm saying is that lots of people can get to them if they want to or not or able to, and it probably isn't as hard for somebody as handsome and well spoken as Andrew. So I mean,
Oh well. You're saying I could talk my way into Steve's tunnel? Is what you're saying?
What I like that we keep talking about these tunnels, and you guys are all like, I ain't scared of no tunnel. And I'm like, all right, let's go to the tunnels. You guys are like, well, somebody else can show you how to get to them. Somebody else will tell you how to get to these totally not scary tunnels that have nothing. Definitely not demons.
And Charlie, do you think that, where were we? Do you think that there's secret tunnels across Lethbridge?
Yeah, let's get in them.
But do you think it was a satanic thing, or do you think it was some kind of obscure mining technique?
I'm going to say little column A, little column B. You got some mining tunnels, might as well do some weird shit in them.
Yeah.
There's all that coal dust in the air.
That's right.
Makes people behave weird.
It does make sense, though, if someone was like, I'm going to build a house on the door to this tunnel that goes to the mine.
So you can get to work.
I just hop down in the tunnel and just zip down to work. Like I can ride my unicycle down to the... So,
I didn't write the story.
Yeah, no, I know, but that sounds a little more feasible than like an elaborate cult, personally. But I mean,
well, I think the access to work, because if you think about not having civic infrastructure, it's like that would make a lot of sense, especially if you have to go down far, or it's like there isn't necessarily an easy way to get from where I live to the Galt hospital or wherever it is that you're going. 3,200 kilometers worth of tunnels. It's like you may have to go quite far. So maybe it's easier to go underground in the winter. So that makes sense. And so I think the whole aspect of bringing Satan into our lives happens because it's just convenient, right?
Sure.
Because it's like
it's so close.
A dark tunnel. We might as well worship the devil.
And they're creepy though too, man. They're creepy. Like the one I've been in Steve's, and it is really spooky down there.
Hold on, you've been in Steve's tunnel?
I've been in Steve's. Like I don't think it's a tunnel, but he's got like a
Steve's dark
subterranean like murder dungeon, and he really does have it, man. Like it's real. I was down there late at night, and he started walking up the stairs, and he's like, I'll shut off the lights and just make your way up the stairs. And I was like, please don't shut off the lights until I'm at the top. Like I was just scared like a little kid's ghost was going to reach out and grab my ankle or something. Like
I am not an advocate for the city of Lethbridge, but that Galt Museum Halloween tour is pretty fun.
Yeah.
I was surprised how entertaining it was. And cool, because they take you into the old hospital wing they have kind of set up. It's really well done.
Lethbridge rules, man. What are you talking? For real, like it's a really cool city. Like there's a lot. I love it, man. I mean, it's
because you don't live here.
I guess so. Yeah.
Those of us that do happily call it Deathbridge. It's just it's what it is.
Oh, and the last question here is this is a big debate. So it could be either one option or the other option, or if you guys have a third option. But someone from Lethbridge. Are they a Lethbridgian or a Lethbian?
Neither. It's a Lethbridgeite.
Lethbridgeite?
I would have guessed Lethbridgeaire.
No. I remember reading somewhere that it's Lethbridgeite.
Lethbridgeite. Okay.
Yeah.
So many more letters.
Yeah.
John, what do you refer to yourself as if someone's like, "Hark, where dost thou hail from?"
Well,
no, I've always been in the lesbian camp, but I think that might also be perpetuated by high school boys.
Well, it's pretty funny, man.
To be perfectly honest, when people ask where I live, I just say south of Calgary.
Me too. Every time it's like, where do you live? Do you know where Calgary is? Yeah, no, they have the Stampede. Yeah, so pretty close to there. It's like you know that place where the older woman ran away and went to Vegas and
Dar Hetherington.
The key to the city that was given to Lethbridge by, I think it was the Great Falls City Council, still hangs in City Hall. So it's like, are you from Dar Hetherington land? Are you from the place where Marilyn Manson got punched in Denny's? Are you from racist woman in Denny's rant place?
Lethbridge has a ton of bad racist publicity.
We hate stormtroopers. I mean,
stormtrooper story.
That was weird.
People thought I was joking when I was telling people that. Okay, you guys, one of you have got to share the stormtrooper story, and then we'll wrap it up. But that is amazing. Like, people have been like, "You're making that up. You're elaborating on this," and I'm like, "This is what happened."
John, I
was going to say, judging from what's behind you, you have.
Yeah, Ryan, maybe you should field this one.
I do like Star Wars.
If it was a David Bowie question, this is my David Bowie pillow. I'd be super happy to take it. But I can see more than 3 Star Wars pieces of paraphernalia in my immediate view of your screen, so you have to take it.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll try to. I'll probably mess it up, but from what I understood, there's this restaurant on the north side of the city that's kind of a nerd restaurant, and they have Star Wars and stuff all around. And I think they do board gaming. I could be totally wrong. I've never been there, and I say nerd lovingly. Don't ever take that as a bad thing. Anyways, they were outside dressed as Darth Vader and stormtroopers and all this different stuff to advertise their clearly nerdy storefront. I mean, if you just looked at the store behind, you would see that it was Star Wars and everything. And so some lady phoned the police saying that there is a person brandishing a gun outside of this store, referring to this poor woman in a stormtrooper costume. So the police come and do the rational thing, knocking her down and arresting her violently without asking any questions or noticing that everything is very cheap plastic. And that was basically it. There was no.
She's dressed as a stormtrooper.
Just stormtrooper, knocked down. She got hurt, and that's our. So I don't want to rag on the Lethbridge police.
No, but that is. I mean, it's hilarious, man. And I heard they had their guns pointed at her, and they're like, "Get down on your knees," and she's like, "I'm sorry,
I can't bend." She couldn't bend down.
I can't bend down.
Yeah,
and I have to take my boots off to.
Wow. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a cop, but I mean, that was a difficult situation, I'm sure. Like, how do you not look and just see what's going on?
Keeping in mind that this restaurant is called Cocoa Vanilla Galactic Cantina.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's clearly a science fiction and space themed restaurant. And I guess to their credit, so they opened just before everything shut down because of COVID. Like just before. And so it's like, for all the businesses that happened to, it's like, that's a rough shake. You know, you put all this money in, invest, have your business plan, and then you have to close. And so I don't know when this was, maybe a week into it being questionable to still be open. And then they made international news. Like, they were on BBC and everything like that, showing a cop. And I don't know if it was the same cop that ran over that deer several times, but it could have been.
Yeah.
and so it's just, and I mean, that's a rock in a hard place right there. Or I'm not going to go where I was going to go with that. So it's a difficult situation either way. But it's like clearly nobody is in that much of a bubble, even in Lethbridge, like to not be aware that there's a stormtrooper with the plastic. I was trying to remember what the model of a stormtrooper blaster was, because I played Battlefront before I had a kid, and I would have remembered. But it's like whatever.
15 or something.
Yeah, like a standard stormtrooper issue. Yeah.
Standard
they would issue. Know. You would know. It's a plastic toy gun. But no, better pull the real ones.
And I can even sympathize. Okay, so you shouldn't really be pointing a gun around. Like, a cop would say that. A really bad day cop might give a ticket for that, maybe. But the way it was handled, I wonder what the phone call was like. This miserable, miserly lady who sits in her in her rocking chair, knitting angrily on her porch step, just looks out and sees some kids having fun, and this hatred wells in her, and she picks up the phone and just unloads on the police officer. And God, that's so, I don't know. But that was a bad story.
Well, wasn't that a windy way to stoke the fires inside your special places? We really do appreciate you stopping by for a listen, and please feel free to rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend, tell your neighbor, tell your foes, spread the good word like stars in the sky. You can check out all of our past casts and social media stuff at itsconspiracypodcast.com, and we will be back in August with our next installment of It's a Cinema-spiracy. Thank you again, Ryan and John. Thanks for joining us. That was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for sharing.
Or at least me. I can't speak for Ryan.
Yeah. I had fun.
Yeah.
Now I want to start my own podcast. I'm going to call it It's a Different Conspiracy.
Oh.
And
you can call it hashtag best friends.
If I call it It's the Conspiracy, can I get away with that? Is that different enough?
I don't know. You better get your civil suit ready. Our lawyers will be in touch.
All right.
Okay, well, take care. Thank you, Charlie, for setting us up.
You betcha. Bye.
There's one. Set for stun.
Lethbridge.